2026 has been one of the most significant years for T.Rex's political involvement here at the state capitol, with one of our bigger wins, but also, I'm afraid, some of our biggest losses. And not just T.Rex losses, but I would say biggest losses for Tennessee as a state. But I want to tell you the good news first. We managed to get, I would say, a very significant victory protecting the right to keep arms in Tennessee by removing a bad law that was infringing on those rights. Under the previous bad law, Tennessee landlords had the ability to prevent tenants from keeping firearms in the homes that they were renting. Now, this might surprise you because in all other ways, Tennessee law treats renters as responsible for that home. It's their home, and they're responsible for their own property inside that home. The fact that firearms were this strange exception is kind of weird. Also, Tennessee is one of the very few states that does this and allows landlords to ban you from owning a firearm in your own home just because you rent it.
Under current law, landlords have the ability to restrict firearm possession within rental properties, effectively creating a two-tiered system where homeowners retain their constitutional rights while renters do not.
Now, at first glance, this may not seem like a big deal because Tennessee is, after all, the patron state of shooting stuff. And no kind-hearted Tennessee landlord is ever going to actually disarm his tenants or prevent them from keeping guns. Surely this is just some weird old law, some kind of oversight, and overturning it won't really do anything, right? Well, I want you to remember that Tennessee has seen significant population growth recently as folks have fled from worse states and also been imported from elsewhere. So as a result, we've seen housing prices skyrocket, and massive construction projects have been taken on by big corporate rental companies, which means that Tennessee citizens are increasingly renting rather than owning their homes, and Tennessee rental units are increasingly being owned by BlackRock and other large corporations instead of those friendly individual Tennessee landlords. Single policy change at Invitation Homes or Tricon Residential, well, that had the potential to disarm a very large percentage of Tennessee citizens. But thanks to Representative Lee Reeves and Senator Bobby Harshbarger, starting on January 1st next year, this will no longer be the case. A significant threat to the Second Amendment rights of Tennesseans has now been eliminated.
At its core, this bill recognizes that a leased dwelling unit is someone's home. A renter should not have fewer rights of lawful self-defense inside their home than someone who owns.
Now, like I said, passing this bill was a big win for protecting firearm rights. Now, you might think that since nearly every other state recognizes the right to keep guns in rental homes, and since Tennessee is a very gun-friendly state, and we've got a Republican supermajority in the legislature, surely this would have been a quick and easy cleanup bill, widely supported by almost everybody on the Hill. A very nice thing to tell your constituents you passed right before the midterm elections, right? Well, it was absolutely not easy. Representative Reeves and Senator Harshbarger fought for this bill tooth and nail for 2 years. I can't even list all the pushback that they received because there was a lot. Some Democrats and lobbyists from the usual gun control groups fought it, as you might expect, but also lobbyists from hospitals, airports, nursing homes, lobbyists from some of the best funded firms in the state opposed this thing. And then also the state lobbyists from Tennessee's own executive departments over here, they fought against this thing. And these are guys who work for the government, which means they're funded by our own tax dollars. And then other Republican legislators also tried to kill this bill in interesting ways, which I'll get to in a minute. So, the new law is a very important victory, partly because of the effect that the law will have, but partly because it was so heavily opposed. And I want to say a huge thank you to Representative Lee Reeves and Senator Bobby Harshbarger for running this gauntlet. And their victory is even more impressive given that they're both freshman senators, which means this is their first term in office. In fact, Lee Reeves agreed to sponsor this bill as soon as he showed up on the Hill, before he was even formally sworn in. As a lawyer and a landlord, he was the perfect sponsor for this legislation. And then the persistence and conviction that he and the senator brought to this bill were exemplary. I also want to thank our lobbyist, Toby Meyer, for his tireless work in supporting this bill as he worked with both of them to get it passed. But I also want to thank every T.Rex customer that made this whole project possible. Without you, the last several years of political activism just would not have happened for us. Without you, a lot of good bills would not have passed, and a lot of bad bills would not have been stopped. But now for the bad news. In 2026, despite this big win, which will have major impacts across the entire state, we also had most of our good gun bills killed. And not just bills that were being run by T.Rex Arms and supported by Toby, but several bills from other folks that should have been a very high priority for the Tennessee legislature. And again, this may surprise you because Tennessee has very high gun ownership, and we have highly conservative voters, and we have a Republican supermajority, and we have a Republican governor. So we should totally have the ability to clean up bad gun laws and pass good ones really easily. But for some reason, we don't do this. A few years ago, you may remember us pushing for some legislation that would lower legal handgun ownership from 21 years of age down to 18. This was after Bruin, so we had the Supreme Court on our side, and we had gathered a ton of popular support across the state. But instead of this being an easy win for politicians to take credit for, it was killed in committee under the radar, and we just could not get that law changed until a Tennessee court ruled that the 21-year age limit was in fact unconstitutional, which was our contention. The same thing happened this year. Last summer, a court found that a number of pieces of Tennessee gun code were in fact unconstitutional again. And when this happens, the state is prevented from enforcing these pieces of unconstitutional code, and then the legislature is told to go fix them at the next session, which was this year. If you want to look it up, that was the Hughes versus Lee case. The lawsuit was directed at Governor Bill Lee. And even though he didn't write any of this bad code that needed to be fixed, he apparently took this personally because at his direction, Tennessee legislators were given a bill, HB 1971, which would prevent Tennesseans from being able to challenge the constitutionality of Tennessee laws in the Tennessee courts, at least until they are criminally charged by the DA first. So that means that now, the Tennessee legislature, when it passes a bad law, the Tennessee citizens can only appeal that to the same legislature that just passed the bad law, which, it completely violates the intended purpose of the separation of powers. I honestly think that the passage of HB 1971 is one of the biggest setbacks that we have had in our ongoing work to hold government accountable. And Tennessee will need to unwind that somehow. However, Hughes versus Lee as a case was already decided. The court ruling required that the legislature address the bad code, which it had found unconstitutional. So as a result, an entire slate of bills had been written to clean up sections of unconstitutional code. We'd already started on this, by the way, but all of these bills were filed this session. Unfortunately, they were also all killed this session in basically an instant, and I want to show you the exact instant in which it happened.
Without objection, I move the following be deferred to February calendar 2027. Senate Bill 2467, Senate Bill 1746, Senate Bill 661, Senate Bill 1227, Senate Bill 824, Senate Bill 2478, Senate Bill 993, Senate Bill 1851, Senate Bill 1405, Senate Bill 1745. Without objection, this is ordered.
So that was pretty anticlimactic, but in that instant that you just saw, 8 firearm bills, many of which were being pushed by T.Rex Arms, some of which we've been working on for 2 years, were completely squashed, all in less than 25 seconds. Now, our Senator, Kerry Roberts, is on that committee, and he voiced his objection to what just happened for the record.
Reed, I'd like to be registered as an objection to the motion to defer the 10 bills to February 2027.
Thank you for the comment. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn for the day.
Motion.
We have a motion to adjourn, and the chair seconds it. All in favor say aye or get up and leave. We are now adjourned. Thank you.
But somehow, the chairman or whoever didn't actually add his objection to the record. So our big win flew under the radar, and these big losses flew under the radar as well. And this is another example of why it's very important to pay attention, not just to the final votes on the floor, but all the other actions taken by elected officials. Senator Todd Gardenhire has been endorsed by the NRA. He got an A+ rating or an A rating in the past because he has voted in favor of firearm freedom bills in the past. However, the procedural matters and the backroom deals are just as important at revealing a senator's character as his recorded votes. In this case, Gardenhire squashed 8 pro-gun bills from his colleagues, several of which were an attempt to comply with court rulings. And this is another reason that we have a lobbyist on the Hill. Obviously, we got a lot of good legislation that we want supported, and having someone to fight for those bills against the other lobbyists is essential. However, having someone on the Hill is also essential if you just want to keep track of what is actually happening and what our representatives are actually doing. On paper, Gardenhire is a staunch Republican. He's a Second Amendment advocate. He's a good representative of a conservative district. However, these sort of sleight of hand acts of political gamesmanship reveal a very different story than the publicly recorded votes and the public face. And by the way, I'm not singling out Gardenhire. I mean, I guess I am for these 8 bills in particular, obviously, but in general, this kind of action is very common. And I think most people miss this because you got to pay pretty close attention to track all the bills that have been killed by committees, or killed by signing them to a non-existent committee, or killed by a politician who carries the bill, but then he drops it at just the right moment as he planned all along, or killed by an apparently friendly amendment which guts a bill and turns it into a hollow shell that accomplishes nothing except for maybe poisoning the well for anyone that wants to bring that same issue up next year. So, when we talk about the need for people like you to be involved in politics, we're not necessarily saying that you have to run for office to be involved. You don't even need to be a lobbyist writing and working legislation with sponsors. Getting involved might be as simple as just learning the process so that you can spot the actual friends and actual enemies of liberty, and then take the correct courses of action during the primaries. Lee Reeves has a primary challenger right now in his district. He fought for firearm freedom with his bill for over 2 years, and now he is, ironically and very falsely, being accused of being a rhino. And people who don't know how the process works do not know how to vet him against his challenger. Now, by the way, this is becoming a very common tactic in our more conservative districts and our more conservative legislators. They're often being labeled rhinos because, well, it's very effective slander. And it's effective because the voters all know that something is wrong up here on the Hill. A Republican supermajority should be able to get more done, but we obviously aren't. There's obviously a number of Republican candidates and elected officials who need to be primaried, but it's less obvious who are actually friends of the establishment other than friends of liberty, who are serving leadership as opposed to serving their constituents, who are honoring the opportunities of office rather than their oaths of office. The solution to this problem, in the legislature at least, is for all of us to be far more discerning when it comes to the people that we send to represent us. And so, if you live in Lee Reeves' district, you need to know about his actual record. Then you'll understand why he has our full endorsement. And if you live elsewhere, then you need to know enough about the incumbents and the challengers so that you can really discern who to support and who to replace. But it will take people like you doing the work to learn how to identify the principal candidates to run and the ones to replace. So get involved. The bare minimum is learning enough about the process that you are not fooled into giving support to the wrong people or removing support from the right ones.